In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the Gadigal and Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which we record this podcast. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and future, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening today. Do you have a chronic health condition and/or a disability? Or do you support someone living with a chronic health condition or disability? Hi, I'm Joel.
And I'm Lani, and we're Imperfectly Human. Welcome to Chronic Conundrums, a podcast from the Sydney Children's Hospitals Network, all about our chronically chaotic lives. In our journeys with a chronic condition, we must become expert navigators of the extraordinary, because every day presents a new challenge.
We're here to tell you what to gain from those aches and pains, because we're more than just patients, surgeries, and prescriptions. We're people too.
The episode we've all been waiting for, the final summit, the grand conclusion to our journeys with a chronic condition. We are joined today by a very special guest who is here to share their experiences navigating adulthood and contributions to shifting the socio-political landscape.
Amassing a following of over 66,000 on TikTok and 13,000 on Instagram, Jordan has engendered an empowering platform to rewrite the narrative on chronic illness and disability.
As a Crohn's disease advocate and a certified moody human, Jordan shares her story to represent, educate, and inspire a voice for the disability community and, more broadly, young people everywhere.
Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. You're really an incredible role model for so many young people who share similar lived experiences with disability and chronic illness and healthcare experiences in the community and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which is a chronic illness, when I was 9 years old, but I experienced symptoms from birth. So I'm now 25. It's basically like 13 years of my life I've been diagnosed with a chronic illness. From the age of 9 through to now 25, I've spent a pretty decent portion of my life in the hospital, and that started off in the children's hospital when I was younger and then transitioning onto the adult hospital when I was 18.
Can you trace back to the moment in your life when you knew you wanted to use your platform as a means for advocacy, and why is that so important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been a few points in my life where I've wanted to use my platform for advocacy, but I guess I didn't really have much of a platform at one point to be able to do so. So even though I tried to do a lot of work in regards to that, it was difficult because it wasn't reaching the right audience. It wasn't reaching my target audience. I didn't really know where to start. And it really began when I made a TikTok account. I was making stupid videos at that point, just, typical trends and things like that, just trying to get a video to succeed on TikTok. And I found that really uncomfortable and unnatural almost. And then I was having some difficulties with perianal Crohn's disease, which can be a really stigmatized condition. It can be very uncomfortable to talk about. And it was after my second surgery on my perianal disease that I decided someone needs to talk about this, because when I was discharged from the hospital, I was left with no information as to how to care for my post-surgical wound. I was left with no information about what, say, a ceton drain is. I had absolutely no idea. And it's a pretty invasive surgery. And then to be told, not be given any information on it, I just thought someone needs to be on the internet to talk about this, because when I went and looked for stories of people living with ceton drains, living with perianal disease, and just lots of different aspects of Crohn's disease and chronic illness in general, I found that there wasn't a lot of information out there and there wasn't a lot of representation on the internet. So I guess I just made this video at one point talking about it, and I was pretty uncensored in how I spoke about it, because I just thought at the end of the day, it's a really normal thing for me and so many other people. And it shouldn't be a conversation that's censored. It shouldn't be a conversation that people shy away from. So that was kind of the point where I decided, let's talk about it. And that video in particular at the time for me got a pretty decent response. It was only about 40,000 views at the time, but I had never had a video with more than 10,000 views. Sometimes I would see 1,000 views as being amazing. So for it to get 40,000, it was pretty overwhelming. And that's where the TikTok and social media journey for advocacy began. There's so many other people in a similar boat or even in the same boat as me. And I guess they need representation. And I decided I wanted to be able to speak for those who weren't able to speak for themselves.
Yeah, for sure. I think from what I've seen of you, it's a lot about normalizing conversations that are so stigmatized, especially for people with chronic illnesses, where it's difficult to talk about in a normal setting.
It's either pity or it's hard to hear about chronic illness from people that aren't even living it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say you don't get it until you've got it. And when you've got it, it shapes so many aspects of your life that you would never have imagined. It impacts so many different things in your day-to-day life. And people take a lot of that for granted. So it's hard to talk to other people about it because as much as they can try and empathize, and I always appreciate when people try to empathize, there's nothing wrong with that, absolutely at all. But I guess it's hard to talk about it with people who just don't get it.
So social media can be a double-edged sword, as we all know. So while it's granted people access to curate our lives and affect social change, the anonymous nature of social media can allow for some uneducated opinions or some unwarranted criticisms. So how was it for you documenting your journey? Was it scary sometimes?
For me, talking about my chronic illness is just like somebody talking about a sport that they do. At the end of the day, it takes up such a large portion of your life that if you exclude that when you're talking about your life, it would be inauthentic.
I think that's such a good point. Living with a chronic illness is such a key part of your life. At the same time, battling to not try and let it define you, but still get it in a conversation can often feel like a struggle. At least that's sort of what I found.
Yeah, and I find that when you talk about it, obviously it's not like in every conversation I have, I feel the need to go, by the way, I have a chronic illness. It's not like that. But when, somebody's talking about their work life or their studies and things like that, and it somehow comes into conversation that I haven't been able to complete my studies and things like that, I feel that I do need to give a reason as to why that is, because I can 110% guarantee you if I did not have a chronic illness, I would have completed my studies. I would be doing a lot more than what I'm doing at present. So it kind of has to come into it. If I just said that that was the case and didn't explain why, I feel like that would be inauthentic, because the reason for it is not because of a lack of motivation or a lack of persistence and drive. It's genuinely because I haven't been able to because of my health. My perspective on it is those who are in a position to judge are in a position of privilege. These stigmas surrounding chronic illness and everything that we're discussing right now, they come from society's perception of what normal is and what we should consider normal. It is a social issue. My biggest thing is we need to shift this stigma. We kind of need to move away from thinking that these things shouldn't be talked about, because at the end of the day, in my situation, because I have a bowel disease, we all use the bathroom, so to speak. I hope that's okay to say that, but we all use the bathroom. And I get so many people who get grossed out when I mention something like having a colostomy or perianal disease. And it's not like I go out of my way to mention it at the dinner table, but if it comes up in conversation, we need to normalize it, because if we don't, people who are living with these stigmatized conditions and stigmatized medical appliances, I suppose, like colostomies, ileostomies, just stomas in general, feeding tubes, people begin to feel as though these things need to be hidden from the world. They need to shy away from the world. And I can tell you right now that when I was first faced with the prospect of getting an ostomy when I was 15 years old, and I was told, you may wake up with an ostomy, we don't know, I said to my surgeons, if you're going to wake me up with an ostomy, don't bother waking me up. And the fact that that was my view on life with an ostomy upsets me so much. I guess I wish that I could be the person that I needed when I was 15 years old, hearing that I might wake up with a colostomy. Something that I have struggled with recently, and I did struggle with as a child as well, and as a teenager and into early adulthood, I struggled with the changes to my appearance and changes to my identity and who I perceived myself as being. For example, this is just a real recent change, but I lost my hair due to chemo for my stem cell transplant. And for me, my whole life I'd had hair and I had looked a certain way. And our illness has the potential, like things like steroids and whatnot, they have the potential to change your appearance so drastically. And I think that's something that I wish that I'd learned sooner, is that my identity as a person with a chronic illness should not be ever linked solely to my appearance. It shouldn't be linked to how I look when I look in the mirror, because that changes so drastically when you live with a chronic illness. I went from being one version of myself who on the exterior looked healthy. She looked like a healthy human. She had long hair. She was, the epitome of healthy, but she wasn't healthy. Now I look at myself and I now have a colostomy bag. I have, little to no hair. It's growing back, but I'm a completely different version of myself. And at the same time, I'm still the same me inside. I'm still that person with the same views, the same values in life, the same core beliefs, interests, the same heart, the same caring nature. I will always be those things. And I don't think that, especially if you're living with a chronic illness, your identity should ever be solely linked to your appearance. Because if you link it with your appearance, you're going to go through a lot of changes throughout your journey with chronic illness, and you're going to lose track of your identity a lot. Really important to dig deep and work out what your core values are as a person and what you stand for, because that's what really makes you you.
So this digital age has also facilitated the unprecedented rise of people who are influencers, often charismatic and talented people who have revamped entertainment businesses, brands with their content. And with your following, can it often be difficult to separate the influencer appeal from the advocacy?
Absolutely, yes. I personally have never at any point really considered myself to be an influencer, just because I guess it's not really the title that I would give myself. I think there's a bit of stigma associated sometimes with the title influencer, which there shouldn't be. It's a job like any other. It does take a lot of dedication and it takes a lot of time and patience. But in terms of the advocacy aspect, I find that I am able to separate it most of the time, because it's just me being authentically myself and speaking about things that I'm passionate about, which, you know what, influencers do that as well. There is definitely a bit of a blurred line there, but either way, as long as the word is out there, I don't care whether that line is a little bit blurred. But yeah, I just think it's about being real, being unfiltered and authentic.
So what advice would you have for other young people living with a chronic illness or a disability who want to contribute to that greater conversation around representation, either for yourself or generally for other people in your community? And what's your sort of process when you share that story of your own to people from a lived experience?
Yeah. So my biggest piece of advice would be to think about the sort of person that you needed when you were at your lowest point, the sort of person that the type of representation that you wanted to see on the internet or within the media in general. Look, at the end of the day, nobody has any obligation to share their story with anyone. It's not to say that just because you've been through this doesn't mean to say that you have to share that story. There's no obligation for anybody to, and nobody should ever feel that they have to share their story. But if you're somebody who really does want to make a difference in that aspect, if you want to make a difference by telling your story through your lived experience, I think it's just really important to think about what you needed at that point in your life. And when it comes to sharing my story, I think because of the way social media is and the way society is, you do have to be mindful of a lot of things when you share a story. You have to be mindful that when you're putting something out there on a platform where there are millions of people who can actively respond to your content, you have to understand that there's going to be people who don't want to hear about it. There's going to be people who don't want to perpetuate that conversation, and that's okay. They can scroll on. Even if they want to leave a comment, that's okay. They can leave a comment. They're free to do so. But you've got to take those things with a grain of salt. And you also have to be mindful when you share stories, because you can be authentic to an extent, but you also have to remember that by being authentic, sometimes you can contribute to perpetuating that stigma. So, for example, in my situation, there are a lot of negative sides to having a colostomy bag. There's definitely a lot of downsides to it. And I know that a lot of people on the internet will push the positives and how much it's changed their life, but there are certainly some things that absolutely suck. And I mean, if I could choose to not have one, I would choose to not have one. But I have to be careful how I word that, because I don't want to put that out onto the internet that it's a negative thing. This is, I've had a leak, I've had this, I've had that happen. It's so bad and I hate it. Sure enough, I do hate it, but there are positives to it and it saved my life. So I have to really balance the positives with the negatives, because by either talking about only the positives or only the negatives, you're further perpetuating that stigma. The one thing that I think of when I share any sort of aspect of my story is the transparency, and also being mindful of how my words and the way that I frame my situation has the potential to impact so many other people in both a positive and negative way.
I love the mindfulness of people's perspectives.
Yeah.
So overlooked, I think.
Look, when I was younger, I would have been like, well, I should be able to talk about this because I want to talk about it. This is my life. I can say what I want. And a part of my brain is still kind of like that. But as an adult, with this whole advocacy and education journey, I have learnt that even though that's the way that I think it should be, and I should be able to say it how I want to say it, that's not the way that it is. We don't live in a world where if I say what I want to say, I can guarantee that the people out there who are watching my videos aren't going to be influenced by it. They are going to be influenced by it. And I guess in that sense, that makes me an influencer. Yeah. But that's the key word, influence. And you've got to be mindful of your influence on other people, and particularly people living with chronic illness who are not always in the greatest headspace. We certainly go through periods where we have poor negative headspaces, and we can be easily influenced into feeling a certain way. And that's not how I ever want my page to come across. So that's why the mindfulness is just so important.
Yeah,
for sure. I think so many people with chronic illness, almost a universal experience that people go through mental turmoil at points in their life. Their health affect their mental health as well.
Yeah.
So being cautious of that when you're being an advocate for people like you. An important thing to keep in mind, that people are more vulnerable.
Yes, that's the word.
Adulting can be difficult, and can be more so when compounded with managing chronic conditions and or disability. Jordan, as someone who has traversed their young adulthood with chronic illness, you must have many life lessons under your belt. And now at 25, do you have any advice for young people with chronic conditions in navigating the adult world?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the most important things that I have learned, and it's only been in the last year that I have learned this, because after going through my stem cell transplant, I lost a lot of independence. And throughout my life, I have lost aspects of my independence because that's just the nature of chronic illness. But I feel like I was able to maintain a certain level. And then after having my stem cell transplant, that went down to zero. I couldn't do things like even just feeding myself. I couldn't move out of bed myself. I had to be moved from a bed to a chair. I couldn't stand up off the ground on my own. So losing that independence kind of taught me a lot, especially in the last year. So even though I was an adult when I learnt this, I think it's very valid to anybody of any age living with a chronic illness. I think that for an individual living with a disability or a chronic illness, it takes a lot more energy and drive to be able to complete these small tasks when compared to a human who's not living with a chronic illness, put it that way. Yeah. And I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for these things, because we compare it to other people, other individuals who are able to do these things. I even at times will sit here and compare myself to my peers who may have bought a house, they may be living independently, they may have children, they may have a degree, they may be really far ahead in their career, they may be operating a household on their own independently. And I compare myself to that and I go, I'm like a baby in comparison. But at the end of the day, I've accomplished so much given the circumstances, and I've just learned to give myself credit for that. And I think that everyone living with a chronic illness needs to give themselves credit for the small wins in life, because for the average person, those small wins may be exactly that, small wins, but for us, they're massive wins. You need to give yourself credit for the small wins, and you need to take the small wins in life. If that small win is you getting off the ground on your own without the assistance of somebody, if it's being able to feed yourself, or simply waking up in the morning and getting ready, even if it's with assistance, it doesn't matter. You need to take those small wins.
I totally get that feeling of, oh, I'm at this stage of my life and on this, but all these people have.
Yeah.
Some of my personal struggles has been like trying to be perceived as normal as everyone else at times.
Yeah.
But I don't feel that's how I'm being perceived.
Hey, normal is so subjective, Your normal for you is very different to other people's normals. It's impossible to not compare your life to somebody else's.
For sure. It feels like a key part of our society is comparing where you're at in life to your peers.
Yeah.
And that culture is just so unhelpful.
Yeah, and it's like you feel a lot of the time like your time's running out, like you're running out of time to do things. And at the end of the day, I felt like this up until now, I suppose. I'm now 25, and after my stem cell transplant, even though it's a day-by-day thing, we don't know how successful it's been and whatnot, but even after that, I've learned my time is only just beginning. I'm 25, and I thought 25 was sort of the end of the line. It's where you have accomplished everything you want to accomplish in life, and then you've got to go about the mundane 9 till 5, and just that's what you do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But I'm 25, and my life is only just beginning. I think that one of the things that helped me the most was allowing myself to be educated on my health instead of being a backseat passenger and allowing my parents and my doctors to make all my decisions for me. I decided to become an active member of that committee, I suppose, and start learning about my health condition, about what certain things meant, and to start asking questions and taking charge of my own health. Because even though it takes a lot of energy and a lot of time to do that, it's worth it in the long run, because when you're on top of it and you understand what's going on in your body and you understand why you're doing the things you're doing to get better or to improve your quality of life, then it makes life a lot easier. It makes it much easier to advocate for yourself and, I guess, be an active member of your healthcare team. Because at the end of the day, the patient is the person who makes the decision. As an adult, you are the number one priority in your healthcare, and your decision is the only decision that counts. What a doctor says is literally up to you to decide what you want to do. It's so important to just be educated and to understand why you're doing the things you're doing. You can't advocate for yourself if you don't understand what you're advocating for.
Do you want to share more about your platform, just to add into the podcast to reach out to more young people?
So on Instagram, you can find me as @JordyDarian. So JordyDarian. And then on TikTok, you can find me as It's Jordy's World, and Jordy spelled Jordy. And basically, I just share a lot about my personal journey, a lot of education and advocacy surrounding life with a chronic illness and a disability, and how you can maximize, I guess, your joy in life while living with these chronic illnesses.
Cool. Thanks so much for coming on. It's been super great.
It's been so lovely to chat. Thank you.
Disabled people are amazing. Chronically ill people are amazing. We're capable adults and humans, regardless if we're on healthcare services, if we need living assistance or help for activities of daily living. We're independent adults if we want to be, and we can ask for help, and neither asking for help or acting in independence invalidates our experiences.
We hope this podcast has empowered you with a rich sense of resilience, self-efficacy, compassion, and empathy for others. We hope you can proudly say that you like who you are, illness, disability, and all, and you would not want to be anyone else.
Crossing the final moat, climbing the final mountain, our journey through chronic conditions is complete. Unraveling the conundrums of diagnosis, health dilemmas, and treatment, we have gained more than aches and pains.
At the end of this journey, the complexities of life and living with a chronic condition and/or a disability may no longer be plights and predicaments.
Wow. Yeah, that's how I feel. I feel like, wow, it's been such a journey. And we'll sign off, but we won't be chronically ill in the next episode. We'll just be
Chronically ill.
And that's
That's
how
it.
it is. Thank
Deal
you
with it.
for listening to this series.
While we strive to support you on your journeys with a chronic condition, this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional mental health advice. If you find any topics potentially triggering, please seek help from a local mental health professional or contact Kids Helpline on 1-800-55-1800 for 24-hour advice.